All right, we're recording. And we're going to pick up. We were discussing how Congress, for many senators, many citizens who enter into Congress, eventually make it into a career. This was uncommon in the first 100 years of our nation, but with the onset of transportation technology and advancements, a nice salary with benefits, many people have made Congress a career. Joe Biden is in his 47th year as a senator from Delaware. Our own Jim Inhofe is in his 53rd year. So it has become something that people have made a career out of it, and it has brought up debate among congressmen and senators if there should be term limits like there is with the president, only 2 terms. Supreme Court justices are lifetime appointments, but you don't have to die to get out of the Supreme Court. You can retire, which happened, I believe, with Trump's second pick. Justice Kavanaugh replaced the retired Kennedy, Anthony Kennedy. Of course, the woman now being questioned right now on Capitol Hill is going to, if she is sworn in, she will replace Justice Ginsburg, who died just last month. So when we talk about being a career senator or representative, there are some factors that play into individuals doing this. That is, serving in Congress as a career. The biggest factor is incumbency, and you'll want to know that word. You'll want to know incumbency, or what an incumbent is. In our presidential race, you have the challenger, Joe Biden, running against the incumbent, President Trump. Incumbents are those who already hold the office and who are running for re-election. Why is this a factor in many people becoming career senators and representatives? Because if you're an incumbent, you have pretty much a 90% chance to win re-election. Incumbents win the majority of elections. Incumbents have a clear advantage over those that are running against them. They have a leg up on advertising. And because they get travel allowances and other privileges they can travel quite frequently back to their home state and advertise for re-election. Now, these free rides home that are provided for is called franking or frank. And I want you to know that term. I want you to know what a franking privilege is. Because they have to travel a lot, they get free travel to their home state. Also, they get free mailings to those who are in their district. They don't have to pay postage for a newsletter or a postcard or an advertising, a re-election advertising mail out. They get that free. That's a part of the franking privileges. So incumbents have that advantage over someone who's not in office, who has to raise money for their travel, raise money for mail outs, raise money for all of their all of the activities that are involved in campaigning. Now, those that are in office build up credit with those who they serve, and so they have a service strategy to their constituents, those that are in their district. Their goal while they're in office is to keep these people happy. Remember, the subtitle of our chapter about Congress was Balancing National Goals with Local Interests. So, for example, Oklahoma sends our representatives and our senators to Washington, D.C., and they are involved in the affairs of our nation, but they are also to be there to represent us and look out for our interests. And so they want to keep the people back home happy. Now let's take our representative, Mark Wayne Mullen, for example. And our state is divided into 5 districts, as we saw. We have about 3.8 million people in Oklahoma. So each district roughly has 7.5 to 8 million people, or I'm sorry, 750,000 to 800,000 people. Not quite a million. How is Mark Wayne Mullen going to, and if you remember the district, our district basically was the whole east side of the state, from the northern border with Missouri and Kansas all the way to the southern border of Texas and Louisiana. How is Mark Wayne Mullen going to keep that many people happy and also serve our national interests? Well, remember, each person in Congress is allowed $1 million to hire staff. So your staff people handle most of this work to keep the people back home happy. That way, our actual representative or senator can focus more on what's going on in Washington, D.C. But occasionally, the candidates, especially as it gets close to election time, will come back to the home state and do some campaigning. Another term that I want you to be familiar with is pork barrel spending. Sometimes we just call it pork. So you got to remember frank and pork. Not frank and beans, but frank and pork. Pork is basically federal money that is available for states. It can be a grant. Usually it is grants that come from the federal government, or the federal government has a project, and so much money can go to states that apply for it. That's what our senators and representatives need to be doing for us here in Oklahoma. Making use of available funds that can help our state. Some of these things might be money for a new highway project. Maybe there's going to be a stretch of highway. Let's say between Arkoma and Spiro. I know that there's two main ways to get from Arkoma to Spiro. But let's say your Markway Mullen gets money to make the little two-lane highway between Spiro, the little area where the Fort Towson, is it Fort Towson? Fort Coffee turnoff is. They might get money to expand that to a 4-lane. That's pork barrel spending. Getting federal money for projects and sometimes pet projects back in the state. So that's what incumbents can do that. People who are running against them can't get federal money. So that's an advantage that an incumbent has. That's a service strategy or credit claiming. In your textbook, this section on service strategy is found on page 310 and 311. Another way that incumbents have an advantage is campaign spending or campaign fundraising. The challengers have to raise a large amount of money to defeat an incumbent. Incumbents can ride on their past campaigns, which I'm sure they have not used up all of the money from their first campaign. Remember that they can get money from PACs, and a super PAC can, again, they can't give money directly to the candidate, but super PACs can advertise for an incumbent. Next time you see a political commercial about Jim Inhofe or Abby, her name escapes me. But if you see a political campaign for somebody, watch it until the end and read the very small print at the bottom. And you can see if it was paid for by the candidate or by a super PAC. Because if it's paid for by a super PAC, it'll say, this ad is paid for gun owners of Oklahoma. Not endorsed, or and this commercial was not is not approved by Jim Inhofe. Which means that he's not against the commercial. It just means that he did not plan with them to approve it. And if you've done a good job as a senator or representative, if your district constituents think you've done a good job, then most likely you're going to be able to raise money quite easily over your challenger. And I forget the percentage. Let's see if I can find it here real quick. Top of page 312. Individual donations to a candidate that are $200 or less, they make up 60% of all the funds that are raised by congressional candidates. So if you keep your constituents happy back home, you're most likely going to get 60% of your funds from these people who are going to give $200 or less. Here are Jim Inhofe and gosh, I can't remember her name, Abby Broyles? I'm not sure. I think it's Broyles. Jim has been in our Congress, has been our rep or senator for 53 years. Abby is trying to unseat him. She's got an uphill battle. She even offered to debate him 25 times, but he has refused to debate her once. Now, I told you incumbents win 90% of the time. It's hard to get them out. And usually your PACs and super PACs, but especially your PACs, I believe 75% of the time they support the incumbent. The only time they would support someone like Abby Broyles is if they perceive that she had a really good chance to defeat him. Otherwise, they support him. But sometimes a challenger will defeat an incumbent, and that happened here in our part of the state. Now, this was on the state level. This is Larry Boggs from Red Oak. He has been a state rep for our area. Gosh, I'm thinking over 10 years. So he has been an incumbent, well, probably 12 years. He probably has served 2 terms and was running for his 3rd term. And this is Warren Hamilton, who defeated him by like 53 to 47% just a couple of weeks ago. So incumbents can be defeated. Oh, one more thing that I didn't mention that is an advantage to incumbents, and this is in your textbook. You'll need to know this term, gerrymandering. He's a gerrymander. Gerrymandering is where, thought I might have had something on that. Well, I will get something. She's out of our hair. Anybody tell me what movie that's from? She's out of our hair. Probably came out a couple of years before you were born, but there's been a sequel, animated. That was a verse of song sung by Michael Wazowski on Monsters, Inc. when he thought they had gotten rid of Boo. Anyway, I digress and get distracted here. So gerrymandering is the political action of redistricting redistricting your state. Redistricting. Yes, there we go. And usually the party that's in control will see to it that the district lines are redrawn. Let me bring back up the district map of Oklahoma. So here's the current 5 districts. Right now, our state Congress is Republican controlled, and so now this is something that will help you understand the census too, because we are finishing up the 2020 census, and most likely you didn't do it, but your parents did. And one of the outcomes of the census every 10 years is to redistrict your state according to your population. A few years back, we lost one of our seats. We went from 6 to 5. So the census helps to, the census will determine how many districts we are to get, and therefore how many reps we can send to the federal government. But the state Congress, however it is controlled, will determine how these districts are shaped. And so what they're going to want to do is the Republicans, I think they were in the majority in 2010. And so these redistricting patterns here were probably based on the Republicans trying to get Republican majorities in all of these districts. Can I tell you why I think this Eastern Oklahoma district is so big in area? Now, of course, you've got a lot less people living, especially in our part of the state, the southeast part, than you do around the 2 urban areas. And the same goes for this northwest section, which is even bigger than our section. But I have a theory that the southeast part of Oklahoma is traditionally called Little Dixie, which basically, among other things, means that it was heavily Democratic for so long. Poteau is this LaFleur County is the area of Carl Albert, as well as McAllister. And he became the 3rd highest official in the federal government, the highest serving Oklahoma ever, when he was the Speaker of the House during Kennedy's administration. But notice that it now goes all the way up in here, and it gets pretty close to Tulsa. I believe this is to try to balance this district between Democratic Southeast with more Republicans. Now, in 2008 and in 2012, it might have been 2012, but our state clearly went against Obama. but again, I think it's the 2012 election. It might have been 2008. It might have been both. Our state, we were the only state to have every county go Republican. So if we were to look at all of these districts with a fine-tooth microscope, I guess it should be a fine-tooth comb. Anyway, we would probably see Republican majorities in all 5 districts, or at least about a 50-50 makeup of Republicans and Democrats. So that's gerrymandering, making the districts or reshaping the districts so that it favors the party in power. Now, what I'm going to share with you now is not in the not on the slides, but it's in the textbook. What are some of the, are there any drawbacks to being the incumbent? And starting on page 313, there are several pitfalls that can cause an incumbent to lose. The first thing that could cause an incumbent to lose is something that is very disruptive. And we might be seeing it here in 3 weeks when we vote for president. When 2020 started, it looked like Trump was going to win re-election very easily because the economy is strong. A lot of people believe that he's kept his promises in a lot of things. Especially very conservative voters are happy about his appointing 2 Supreme Court justices who are conservatives. But now there's this big disruptive issue in 2020 called COVID-19, and it's caused our economy to hurt. And of course, Trump's opponents are going to pounce on that and say it's his fault. And so this is something that can cause an incumbent to lose. In 1991, President George H.W. Bush, that's George Bush Sr., he had a 90% approval rating. He had led our country to defeat Saddam Hussein and the forces of Iraq when they invaded Kuwait, called Desert Storm. We defeated Saddam, we pushed them out. Bush was cruising beautifully with a 90% approval rating. But a lot of times after a war, the economy suffers. And we did go into a downturn in the economy. And so by the time Bill Clinton had won the Democratic nomination, the economy continued to go down, and Bush's approval rating dropped below 50% in less than a year. And it was a clear path for a younger, more charismatic candidate like Bill Clinton to come in and talk about change and win the election. So disruptive issues do not help incumbents. Unless you have someone like a FDR who is able to work through the Great Depression with his New Deal. Another thing that can cause an incumbent to not get reelected is being naughty in their personal behavior. Yes, I said the word naughty. Personal misconduct. How many of our leaders in our nation have had to step down or they were forced out because of a scandal? Whether it was a financial scandal, whether it was a scandal involving foul play, or a sexual scandal, a moral failure. If you're serving and something like that happens, it really, really hurts your chance to be reelected. Midterm elections. What do we mean by midterm elections? Those are the elections that happen in between the presidential elections. Every 4 years, we have presidential elections. And so halfway in between those are the midterm elections. Now, several of you on your first discussion mentioned that you look forward to voting in 2024 when you are old enough to vote. But I think some of you will be old enough to vote in 2022 during the midterm elections. And you need to be involved in that. Midterm elections is when we elect our governor here in Oklahoma. And it's also when the representatives are up for re-election. Markwayne Mullin and the other 5 state reps. Now the senators, Jim Inhofe and James Lankford, they serve for 6 years. So we won't vote for a senator every 4, we won't vote for senators during every midterm election. Sometimes we'll vote for them during the midterms. Sometimes we'll vote for them during the presidential elections. It just depends on when those 6 years fall. But the reason why incumbents lose a lot more during midterm elections is because less people vote. I believe we're going to have a huge voter turnout. We've already had 12 million people vote with early voting. And one of you made a strong case that you think it's going to be a low turnout because of the mail-in voting. But I disagree. I think it's going to be a big turnout. And I was thinking about this today. Right now, the news, and they did this back in 2016, they kept showing that Hillary is ahead in the polls. Hillary is ahead. And right now, they keep showing that Joe Biden is ahead, and he keeps getting a bigger lead. I think that's going to cause more Trump supporters to make sure they get out and vote. Anyway, midterm elections also are a way that the people can give their opinion about the president's first 2 years in office. If the president has done a good job, if the majority of people perceive that, then usually your incumbents will win. That is, the incumbents who are the same party of the president. But we saw it with Obama in 2014, and we saw it with Trump in 2018. There was a switch in some of the houses of Congress because the people were basically saying we're not pleased with the job that the president's doing. When President Trump got in office in 2016, he had a Republican majority Senate and a Republican majority House. But in the 2018 elections, the House went back to Democrat majority. Now, sometimes incumbents lose in a primary election. You need to know the difference between a primary election and a general election. For example, coming up in November is the general election for the presidency, as well as for a Senate seat in Oklahoma, Jim Inhofe versus Abby Broyles. And there are House, I believe there's some House seats up for, Hamilton, who already defeated Boggs, is now going against a Democratic woman. Forget her name, but that's the general election. The primary election is what happened back in June, and then we had to have a runoff in August. But a primary election is where you have challengers from your party challenge an incumbent. And our example again is Warren Hamilton from McCurtain defeating Larry Boggs of Red Oak. They're both Republicans. Boggs is the incumbent. He got defeated in the primary election. So now it's going to be Hamilton versus the Democratic woman. And whoever wins will have a new state rep from our area. So if you have a strong primary election challenger, that can hurt incumbents. And then another thing that can be a pitfall for incumbents are super PACs. And again, this only happens if a super PAC feels like the challenger has a good chance to defeat the incumbent. And if the super PAC feels that way, then they will pump more of their money into trying to get the challenger elected. Finally, what is the makeup of our senators and our representatives? Does anybody want to guess what type of profession dominates those who hold these offices? Anybody for 1,000 prof points? The dominant type of worker who becomes a representative or senator are lawyers. Lawyers are the majority kind of occupation, vocation that serves in our Senate. So our Senate, our House, Congress is not a little microcosm representation of our population. Now, along with lawyers, you will have professional business executives, educators, bankers, and journalists, along with lawyers, make up roughly 90% of congressional membership. You don't have many housemakers, homemakers, blue-collar workers, clerical workers who are in Congress. However, if you live in a state like Oklahoma, where we have a lot of agriculture, it is common to see farmers and ranchers serve in Congress. So we will stop there. And after fall break, we come back on Monday. We'll pick up on the leadership in Congress, leadership in the House and leadership in the Senate, as well as all the committees. Yay, yay, yay. Do you have any questions for me? Well, enjoy your fall break. And we will see you, if the creek don't rise, on Monday. I guess with Zoom technology, I should say, if the electricity doesn't get zapped out. I'll stick around for a couple of minutes if there's any questions in private on the chat, but otherwise, have a great day.